3 sinister and spine-chilling true stories of haunted countryside terrors exposed and discovered. When the Anderson family left the chaos of Chicago for the quiet charm of Maplewood, they didn't realize they were stepping into a nightmare. The farmhouse, a picturesque facade against rolling fields, promised idyllic family memories, but something dark and sinister lurked behind its wooden walls. Their first eerie experience was nothing but the wind, or so they thought. Late at night, the house creaked, and shadows danced through the rooms. But even that wouldn't prepare them for what lay ahead. The postcards came first, faded photographs depicting past families, eyes sunken and smiles twisted. Gone but not forgotten, each card mocked them, chilling their bones. Jim and Sarah dismissed the growing unease, blaming it on an old house settling. But when 8-year-old Jake began talking about a man with a hat who hovered by his window at night, Sarah worried. She brushed it off as childhood imagination, but dread gnawed at her insides. Then there was Carl, the neighbor with an uncanny smile and stories that sent shivers down their spines. Over tea, he leaned closer, eyes darting. The Hargroves, he said, had lived there decades ago. Tales of rituals dark and twisted, swapping lives for eternal youth haunted the air around them. Maplewood was strange, Carl warned, almost too familiar with its ghosts. Things worsened when the sheriff waved off their concerns, feigning interest while casting doubtful glances. Panic bubbled beneath the surface as whispers from the walls grew louder. Days passed, color drained from their cheeks as they found themselves trapped in a nightmare, a web of terror spun tight around the family. Just old bones groaning, Jim tried to comfort Sarah, but with each flickering light and every unsettling chill, the truth was harder to ignore. And then Jake went missing for a night. His absence gnawed at them, a void that echoed with terror. When he finally returned, his light had dimmed, his eyes reflecting something otherworldly. Jake was different. He now listened intently to the house's whispers, his laugh gone, replaced by an unsettling chill. Panic seized Sarah's heart, as visions of the postcards flashed in her mind. What happened to their joyful home? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days grew hauntingly darker. Emma began wandering into the woods, her spirit captivated by something beyond reach. Just taking a walk, she said, a vacant expression plastered across her face. Anxiety clung to Sarah like a second skin. Then the postcard appeared on Emma's pillow, its message starkly clear: join us. The very air crackled with danger, as Jim and Sarah realized their idyllic farmhouse was far from a dream. It was a trap woven from sorrow and shadows of families lost. The community's indifference felt like a snare, tightening around their throats. With each moment, they understood the ghastly truth: the whispers didn't just surround them. The house hungered for more, and it wouldn't stop until it had claimed what it desired. As darkness blanketed Maplewood, they had to decide. Would they unravel the sinister history or surrender to the chilling fate that awaited? The dawn loomed heavy, but what lay beyond still whispered enticingly, a storm they couldn't simply outrun. A dawn broke gray and heavy, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the dense clouds hanging above Maplewood. Inside the farmhouse, unease wrapped around the Andersons like a shroud. Sarah paced the living room, her mind racing. She couldn't shake off the image of that postcard. Join us. Whose voice was calling from the pages? Jake sat on the floor, transfixed, his gaze locked onto the shadows stretching across the walls. He says it's okay, Mommy. He wants me to come play, he murmured, his words chilling Sarah's blood. The boy's laughter, once bright, had turned hollow, a laugh that echoed like a haunting melody in an empty hall. Who, Jake? Who wants you? Jim demanded, his voice tight with anxiety. But Jake only shrugged, a sullen smile creeping across his face. It sat there too long, too unsettling, and then he pointed toward the window. The man with the hat, he waiting. The world outside felt suffocatingly still. The trees stood eerily silent, their branches reaching out like bony fingers. Salty drops of sweat seeped down Sarah's spine as she strained to look outside, but there was nothing. Just the familiar whisper of the wind, a sound layered with sinisterness. "Enough, Jake!" Sarah shouted, her voice cracking, a wave of panic rising through her. "We're going to find your sister." The thought made her stomach churn, every instinct screamed for them to stay, to lock the doors and hide away. But she couldn't abandon Emma. They found her in the woods, standing still as a statue, her back turned toward them. The air hung thick with tension, each step crunching on twigs sounded too loud, as though announcing their approach. "Emma!" Jim called, but she remained motionless, entranced by something just beyond reach. "Can you hear them?" "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, her voice a slumbering whisper soft with longing. "Emma, honey, come here," Sarah pleaded, unease gripping her heart. As they drew nearer, the woods grew darker, the shadows draping like curtains around the girl. The air shifted, and suddenly they were not alone. From behind the trees, figures emerged, distant echoes of the families from the postcards. Their faces were pale and drawn, eyes hollow, mouths twisted in forced smiles. Those skeletal shapes reached in unison, shadowy fingers beckoning Emma closer. "Join us," they sang, their voices an eerie chorus that danced through the air. A chill swept through Sarah, freezing her in place. "Mommy, I want to go with them." "They said I can play forever," Emma said, taking a hesitant step forward, her gaze locked on the figures. Something primal snapped within Sarah. She lunged forward, gripping Emma's arm tightly. "No! We're leaving." But Emma resisted, her small frame surprisingly strong, her voice insistent. "I want to stay." Panic clawed at Jim. "Emma! Snap out of it. This isn't real." But shadows festered, floating closer with every passing second, closing the distance between them and the dream woven within their grasp. The whispering grew louder, swirling like a tempest, and the figures shifted, transformed. Their faces reflected intertwined horror and desperation. There was no joy, only an insatiable hunger that spilled from their grim expressions. "Don't you know, little girl? We don't forget." Sarah felt the temperature drop as their icy breath brushed against her skin. Time blurred around them, the woods pulsed with dread. In that moment, as their hearts raced and fear condensed like mist around them, Sarah realized she was faced with an impossible choice. Would they fight to take Emma back, risking their lives and souls, or yield to this ominous call that promised eternal play? Finally, she summoned her strength. "We're leaving, Emma!" she yelled, pulling the girl back, the grip of terror tightening around them as the shadows writhed in protest. The space thickened, the air electric with fear. They stumbled back, the whispers escalating to a screech, drowning out their thoughts, and just as they turned to escape, the voice of the man with the hat, deep and resonant, echoed, "You can never leave, you will always be ours." With that, the darkness swallowed the trees, and Maplewood seemed to close in tighter around them. What awaited on the other side of their desperate flight? Would they make it home? Or would they fall victim to the sinister lure of the house that yearned to keep its secrets? They didn't look back. A primal urgency coursed through Sarah and Jim as they yanked Emma away from the grasp of shadows. They ran, hearts pounding like war drums in their chests, the weight of fear propelling them forward while the sinister whispers ricocheted through the trees, dancing around them with each frantic step. "Faster!" Sarah cried, her voice almost swallowed by the thick air, but her message was clear. They burst forth from the woods, stumbling back onto the dry, cracked earth of their front yard. Choking on anxiety, Sarah glanced at Jake, who stood frozen at the edge of their property, an eerie calmness wrapped around him like a frost. His little fingers inched toward the horizon, where the man in the hat still lingered just out of sight. "Jake! Come here!" Jim shouted, but the command felt futile. The boy remained ensnared in a trance, as if the world around him had vanished. Sarah felt tears of frustration sting her eyes. They couldn't leave him behind, they wouldn't lose another child. Gathering every ounce of bravery, she darted back to Jake. She reached out, desperate to pull him away from whatever dark pull held him captive. "Jake, please. We need you. It's not safe." But he shook his head slowly, eyes glassy, mouth twisted in forced nonchalance. "He's waiting, Mommy. It'll be fun like a game." He giggled, and that hollow sound sent shivers racing down Sarah's spine. How could he find joy in this horror? "Jake! Snap out of it!" Jim's voice broke, rising with panic. Suddenly, from the edge of the clearing, the shadows surged forward. They elongated, darting between the trees, spilling out onto the ground like a tide, reaching, grasping, hungry for more. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah grabbed Jake's arm, twisting him toward her. "We're going. Now!" she yelled, and with that, the connection between the boy and the ghastly figures began to unravel. "Mommy," he whimpered, but she didn't let go, pulling him with every ounce of strength she had left. The clasp of darkness was relentless, but the family's bond was more potent. With every stride, Sarah felt the shadows clawing at her heels. The road to safety grew perilously long. The cacophony of whispers crescendoed, echoing her thoughts. "You belong with us. You can't escape." They stumbled onto the porch, breaths ragged and hearts hammering against their chests. But as they slammed the door shut behind them, a bone-chilling realization clawed at Sarah's mind. The house. That house, once their sanctuary, now loomed like a monstrous entity, cracking the windowpanes with the gusts of wind that rattled it. "It's not over," Jake said, eyes wide with an understanding too mature for his young frame. "They want more." A low growl emanated from the walls, a sound that reverberated in her chest. Shadows from the outside slithered through the cracks, reaching for them as if the house itself was alive, hungry for the warmth of their fear. The ceiling creaked like distant laughter, and blurry figures could be seen just beyond the windows. Flashes of pale faces, mirrored back at them, twisting and contorting in glee. "Stay together," Jim commanded, and with a fierce grip, he clasped both children's hands in his. They huddled close, a fragile unit against the beckoning darkness that surrounded them, but the man with the hat stood resolutely just outside, even closer now, his presence a tangible force pressing against the very fabric of their reality. "Join us," he sang softly, chillingly, as the shadows sought to break through. The air felt electric, a dreadful anticipation hovering over them like a storm cloud ready to burst. Sarah's mind raced. They had to find a way out. But what if the true horror wasn't the entities outside, but what festered within their own home? Suddenly, a horrible thought gripped her. What if they couldn't escape? "Where do we go? What do we do?" she whispered urgently. Jim's face reflected the chaos of her thoughts, worry dawning in his eyes. Outside, the shadows stirred, swirling around the foundation with wild energy, like a storm converging. They could feel the pull, a magnetic grip pulling at their feet, urging them to let go of their ties to the light, to step into eternal darkness. The front door rattled violently, the sinister symphony rising to a fever pitch. In that moment, they knew they needed to make a choice: to confront the horror outside or to face the unknown lingering in the depths of their home. Jake's voice echoed softly, "I want to play." The decision rippled through them like an icy wave. What would they choose at this crossroads? Would they brave the entity at the door or delve into the secrets that lay hidden in their own abode? All anxiety simmered, each heartbeat quieting as they drew closer to the brink. The time to act was now. The door shuddered again, furiously now, rattling on its hinges. Each tremor sent a jolt through Sarah's bones. She clasped Jake tighter, his small body trembling against her. The shadows writhed on the other side, a swirling mass of dark intent. Time was running out. "Jim, we can't just stay here," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darted to the basement door ajar in the shadows of the old hallway. "We have to check," he replied, his words tight with dread. "Maybe there's a way out down there." Down there? Sarah felt a cold spike of fear. The basement had been a source of anxiety for her ever since they had moved in. Dark, dank, and filled with the rustle of things that could not be named, but there was no choice. The man with the hat was calling, and those whispers grew louder, an almost hypnotic chant urging them to succumb. "Okay," she said. "But we stick together. No matter what." With an anxious nod, they dashed toward the basement door, Jim leading the way. The wind howled like a mourning spirit outside, echoing their fears back to them. As Jim reached out for the doorknob, it turned with a creak that made Sarah's skin crawl. Maybe this was where it all began? Perhaps they were stepping into a trap or, worse still, an ambush. The stairs gaped ahead, dark and foreboding. They illuminated the way with a flickering flashlight, the warm glow barely managing to stave off the suffocating blackness. For a long moment, they stood at the threshold, breathing heavily, their hearts synchronized in rapid beats of panic. Suddenly, an icy gust surged behind them as the front door burst open, slamming against the wall and shattering the moment of stillness. It sent the shadows spilling forward across the threshold like a flood, a dark tide eager to claim its prey. "Down! Now!" Jim shouted as he shoved Jake and Sarah ahead. Plunging into the stairs, they rushed down, the air thick with an unsettling dampness that clung to their skin. Each step echoed like a distant warning, bouncing off the walls. They descended into what felt like a living tomb, the temperature dropping with each breath. Sarah felt a grip of unease tighten around her ribcage. Something was off. At the bottom, they flung the flashlight beam around the basement. Dust floated like ghosts in the sharp light, illuminating cobwebs spun thick and brittle. Old boxes lined the walls, some cracked open as if curious hands had rifled through them long ago. "What now?" whispered Jake, eyes darting around nervously. The shadows swirled, creeping along the edges. Jim gestured to a corner hidden beneath an old table. "Let us see what's in those boxes. They might help." Trembling, they stepped closer. As they lifted the lids, a foul stench seeped from within, an unsettling mix of decay and forgotten memories. Old photos. Clothes. A stuffed bear that once belonged to a sweet child, but this bear was grimy, its button eyes reflecting a plea for rescue. A soft voice, so familiar it sent a shiver racing down Sarah's spine, echoed from the shadows. "Mommy, Daddy." Sarah's heart stopped. The voice was faint, barely distinct, yet it tugged at the strings of her soul. "Emma?" Jim choked, the significance of finding their daughter hanging heavy in the air. As they spun, ready to call out, the basement door slammed shut behind them. The silence echoed, thick and suffocating. They were trapped. The walls they had thought of as sanctuary now felt like a prison, eyes gathering in the dark corners, the shadows growing denser. The whispers unfurled again, no longer seductive but fierce and accusing. They wanted more than just a fight, they demanded an exchange. "Emma!" Sarah yelled, panic threading through her voice. "Where are you?" The shadows stirred, merging into a singular, monstrous figure in the center of the room. It towered, its eyes glowing with malice. The man in the hat watched from the darkness, a sick smile painting his face. His voice slithered through the air like smoke. "You've come to play, and play you shall." They had made their choice, but was it the right one? A question lingered. Ominously, sharp and deadly, who would they lose this time? As the ground underfoot began to tremble, a deep rumble sounding from the core of their house, fear blossomed into terror. The shadows crept closer, weaving a web of despair around the family, and darkness whispered promises that might lead them to something far worse than death itself. What horrors awaited them in this abyss? Would they unravel the truth before it consumed them whole? The creature loomed larger, its form twisting, shifting as if trying on new, darker faces. Sarah's breath came out in ragged gasps, panic clouding her thoughts. Jake clutched her arm, his tiny fingers digging into her flesh. They were anchored together, and with each second, the weight of the situation pressed down like a steel blanket. "Emma." Jim's voice quivered, desperation doubling the anguish of the word. "Show yourself." But the only response was a silence that felt suffocating, more stifling than the dampness surrounding them. Then it came again, a scratchy murmur echoing off the walls. The voice was more distinct now, inviting yet chilling. "Help me." The figure split into multiple shadows, moving unnaturally, weaving around them like smoke. Sarah's heart raced as she squinted into the darkness, searching for a glimpse of her daughter. "Emma, where are you?" she yelled, but the words got lost in the warped air. "Do you hear her?" Jake whimpered, his small voice barely audible. "She's here, Mommy." Jim moved, his frame trembling as he whispered, "We need to find her." He darted toward the voice, drawn to it like a moth to a flame, leaving Sarah paralyzed by dread. "No. Jim, wait. We have to stay together." But he was already slipping into the abyss that consumed them. Shadows enveloped him, intertwining and pulling him deeper into the dark. Sarah could only watch as he vanished, the sound of his breath disappearing into the silent void. "Daddy!" Jake cried, tears glistening in his wide eyes. The boy began to tremble in terror as the shadows shifted around him, their presence tightening like a vice. "Jake, stay by me," Sarah instructed, her voice desperate, but the shadows pulsed, their whispers rising into a cacophony. The darkness, alive with cruel laughter, surrounded them both, pulling her thoughts into confusion. The basement felt vast now, a tunnel of spirits bleeding despair. The glowing eyes of the creature focused on Sarah, and she felt their weight digging into her heart, stoking a frantic blaze of fear. "What do you want?" she shouted at the figure, struggling to hold on to her courage. A low, bone-chilling laugh erupted from the darkness. "You know what I want." An exchange. The walls tightened like a noose, and a vision flashed in her mind, a sickening spiral of loss and betrayal. She saw herself, standing alone, cradling a small, worn bear with button eyes pleading for help. It was too much to bear. "You can have her. Just let us go," Sarah screamed, her resolve spilling over the edge. "Foolish, foolish mother." The creature's voice coiled around her mind, lingering in her thoughts. "You want her back? But who shall take her place?" "No. I'll give anything," she gasped, feeling the shadows tugging at her once more, their icy fingers drawing closer. Jake was still there. The panic rose in her, a tide threatening to drown her reason. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. "We'll find her together," she yelled, turning to face her son, hoping her fierce love could break through the encroaching darkness. Everything depended on that bond. But then the basement began to shake anew, a deep rumble rising like an angry beast. The shadows twisted, their whispers becoming shrill, pressing in on all sides, suffocating in their numbers. In that breathless moment, Sarah's heart sank. The creature unleashed its darkness, the walls closing in with a desperate hunger. From the depths emerged a new sound, a chilling giggle that sent a cold wave of dread coursing through her veins. "I will take what is mine." Suddenly, the lights flickered, illuminating for a brief moment the inky mass that sought them. "Mommy!" Jake screamed, his small voice breaking as he was pulled from her grasp. A new scream echoed through the chaos, one that shattered Sarah to her core. "Mommy, help!" Time froze. The world around them grew dark, and everything shifted. The last flicker of light dimmed away, leaving Sarah surrounded by endless black. Was it too late to save them? Who would emerge from the abyss when the darkness offered its final, cold embrace? The darkness swirled tighter around her, thick as molasses, complete and consuming. Sarah's chest heaved as her pulse pounded in her ears, a frantic drum echoing against the suffocating silence. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss that shifted and murmured with malevolence. "Jake!" she shouted again, her voice cracking, desperation clawing at her throat. "Where are you?" The silence smothered her, and she forced herself to breathe, her instincts pulling her toward the looming threat. She wanted to run, to escape the darkness, but every moment spent standing still felt like a lifetime wasted. Suddenly, a soft whimper, haunted and fragile, reached her. "Mommy?" It wrapped around her mind like a ghostly hand, both comforting and terrifying. She stepped forward, her heart racing in rhythm with the sound. "Jake, I'm coming." Her words echoed back to her, bouncing off the unseen walls. Each step felt heavy, pulling her down into despair. The shadows skated along the edges of her vision, flickering like candle flames. "Help!" Emma's voice floated again, thinner this time, almost imperceptible. Sarah stumbled, her hands brushing against the rough concrete walls of the basement. They felt cold and damp, as if they were cruel bearers of the sorrow buried within. She followed the sound, navigating through a maze of darkness, her entire being screamed for her to flee. But she couldn't abandon Emma. "Please, Emma, just say something. I can't lose you too." Anguish cracked her voice as she stumbled into the chill. The air grew colder, a frosty breath whispering around her. And then there it was. The creature, standing just outside the narrow beam of her fading hope. Its eyes glimmered with a ravenous hunger, each blaze brighter than the last. "You seek her?" It hissed, the air thick with its taunt. "She is mine now. Just like the others, just like the others." The words clawed at her insides, twisting her stomach. Panic surged as memories flashed, faces of children she didn't know, their eyes wide in frozen terror, fading like echoes of a forgotten dream. "Leave her alone," Sarah cried, a surge of heat igniting her fear. She reached out, instinctively defying the creeping dread. "You can take me instead." The creature paused, the shadows swirling as if considering her offering. It leaned closer, the stench of decay wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. "Now we're talking, but what would make you worthy? You will pay dearly, Mommy." Jake's cry shattered the silence again, desperation lacing each syllable. He was still near, trapped somewhere in this nightmare, and the thought alone propelled Sarah forward. "I want to let you take him." The whispering shadows surged, mixing dread with a sliver of defiance. She could taste the bitterness in the air, a promise of loss that hung heavy. She forced herself to move, deeper into the abyss, searching for any sign of Jake, or Emma, or any refuge from the terror that wrapped around them like a wound that wouldn't heal. Then a flicker of light broke through the gloom, guiding her steps. The hope was fleeting but intoxicating. "This way, darling," she called, each syllable like stepping stones across a treacherous river, but as she advanced, an oppressive weight filled the space behind her, a swift movement, a crushing presence that clenched on her heart. The giggle rang out again, chilling and sweet, tantalizing her that it had all been part of a twisted game. And then it came more urgently, a gasp, a cry that resonated through the void. "Mom!" It was both familiar and foreign. Before she could process the sound, the ground shifted beneath her. She lost her footing, caught in a whirlpool of darkness that felt almost alive. She fell into nothingness. Could she and her son find a way back from the brink, or were they destined to become just another whisper in the shadows? Gravity yanked her down, a merciless hand dragging her through the suffocating blackness. Sarah's scream echoed, dissolving into the void around her. The darkness swallowed her, yet somewhere in that murky expanse, the cries of her children became a lifeline, a haunting melody guiding her. Thud. Her body collided with something hard, the impact jarring and disorienting. Gasping, she pushed herself up, heart pounding against her ribcage. The cold, musty air settled into her lungs, thick with a stench that choked her. She blinked, trying to discern the outline of her surroundings. A dim, flickering light illuminated a series of tattered, shadowy figures against the far wall. It flickered weakly, casting eerie shapes that twisted and danced as if alive. "Jake!" she called, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only an unsettling silence that stung in her ears. She forced her feet to move, every instinct screaming that she must not lose hope, not now. Emma! She shouted again, desperation clawing at her throat. She stumbled toward the light, the floor uneven and sharp beneath her feet, a net of jagged stones that seemed to shift beneath her. The figures in the light began to coalesce into recognizable shapes: children. Brown hair, blue eyes, set in expressions of horror. They reached out, their mouths moving but no sound escaping. Fear churned in Sarah's stomach. The shadows twisted tighter, and she had the terrible feeling they were warning her. Then she heard it again, the gasping, frantic voice crying, "Mommy!" That plea, raw with terror, ignited a fire in her chest. It drew her closer to the light, and the children's faces started to contort in anguish, eyes widening, horror spilling over as they pointed behind her. A rush of wind spun around her as she turned, threatening to knock her off balance. The presence loomed closer, the creature's eyes glowing ferociously, devouring the little light left in the room. "You think you can save them?" It hissed, its voice slithering through the air, thick and suffocating. "They chose to play." Just like you, panic surged through her as she approached the wild and morbid scene. The walls of this strange space warped and curled like a living organism, closing in around her. She could taste the fear humming in the air like static electricity. "No! I want to let you take them!" she screamed, every ounce of her will pouring into defiance. She stepped forward, reaching out to the frightened children. Her fingers brushed against the trembling hands, and she felt a quickening pulse of energy, a brief moment of connection, a reminder of safety. But then it shattered. The laughter cut through the darkness again, a cruel symphony taunting her resolve. The creature's gaze fixated on her, hungry and piercing. "Your love holds no power here," it sneered, the atmosphere thickening with dread. "All will be lost." The flickering light sputtered, the children's faces contorted in pain, twisted into shadows. Suddenly, she felt a sharp tug at her shoulder, yanking her away from the dark specter. A tiny hand grasped hers with a strength that defied the fear around them. "Mom!" Jake's voice rang out, shimmering through the night like a beacon. Sarah spun around, hope flooding her veins. But as she turned, the creature lunged, screeching as darkness poured from the shadows like a tide. It reached for her with claws that glimmered with malice, the air thrumming with a malicious energy. "Wait!" she gasped, her heart nearly bursting. Just as she nearly collided with it, a blinding flash erupted, illuminating everything for a brief, suspended second. Everything froze. In that moment, the world stilled, her heart a drum in her ears. Shadows pressed heavily, and the creature lurked, waiting, hungry and patient. Then the light faded, and panic flooded back. With the brief illumination vanished, so did clarity, leaving Sarah trembling and lost in the disorienting gloom. Where was Jake? "Mom!" The voice echoed again, sharper, closer. But now it was mixed with something else, something unrecognizable, sinister. "Omnia preta, you cannot escape," the creature murmured, its voice a chilling whisper, weaving around her like a noose. As panic clawed at her sanity, Sarah gripped Jake's hand tightly, the fear rising like bile in her throat, knowing they were caught in a lethal dance with a darkness that had only begun to reveal its true face. But could they break free, or had they stepped into a trap they couldn't hope to unravel? The air pulsed with coldness, wrapping around Sarah like a shroud. She squeezed Jake's hand harder, the familiar warmth grounding her in this nightmare. But the creature's hiss and icy breath close to her ear sent a numbness creeping through her veins. "You will join them. They chose and you will too." Each word landed like a hammer blow, reverberating in her skull. The tendrils of darkness tightened, wrapping around her limbs, testing her resolve. "No!" she shouted, but the word barely escaped her mouth, crushed by the weight of despair. "Let us go, Mom." Jake's voice cracked, desperation thrumming in his tone. He tugged at her, but the shadows clung to her like a haunting memory. It hurt to see his face twisted with fear, illuminated only by that flickering light which now seemed to dim dramatically. A sudden chill swept through the air, leaving goosebumps racing across her arms. Jake! She turned back to the silhouettes, a moment of clarity sparked within the encroaching gloom. Emma! Where are you? From the dark, a whispery echo reached her ears, trembling with urgency. Mommy! Emma! Sarah's heart thundered. In that instant, as she felt the darkness thicken, she realized the shadows weren't just surrounding her, they were converging, closing in tighter. Then it happened. A painful screech sliced through the air, a sound that threatened to burst her eardrums. With each pulse of pain, the flickering light dimmed further, swallowed by the yawning darkness. Mom, we need to run. Jake shouted, his grip faltering. Don't let go of my hand. She pushed against the heaviness closing in, fighting to keep them grounded. Fear pulsed through her, sharp and primal. But she also felt something else creeping in, a chilling despair that whispered promises of surrender. In a surge of adrenaline, Sarah tore her gaze away from the spectral forms pressing in on her, focusing instead on the path ahead. This way! She urged, darting toward the light, pulling Jake with her. As the shadows writhed behind them, the twisting figures of her children melted into the dark, their once familiar faces now distorted and obscured. Each stride felt like a crime against the terrifying weight wrapping around them. They stumbled forward, and the air changed. The darkness recoiled slightly, as if unsure how to respond to their resolve. But just then, she found herself staring into a pair of glowing eyes, hungrily watching from the void. Panic filled her chest as she skidded to a stop, the weight of dread sending a tremor through her limbs. Run! She screamed, thrusting Jake ahead with a forceful shove. He stumbled but recovered, shooting toward the flickering light where shadows receded like a waking nightmare. With sheer force of will, she followed him, desperate to break free of the haunting. But oh, how the darkness retaliated. Tendrils lashed out, a whip crack in the dark. One curled around her ankle, yanking her off balance. She howled in fear as she fell, skin scraping against the unforgiving stone. Mom! Jake's voice called, praying through the murk. She could hear his footsteps closer, desperate. But the shadows didn't care. They twisted around her, suffocating her cries, dragging her deeper into the abyss. Leave her! A childlike voice cried, filled with fury. Get away from her! But the darkness choked the sound, consuming it before she could pierce the veil. Then, another light aflash, a glimmer of golden warmth shooting through the shadows. She squinted against it, bracing for the weight of the creature to crush her. The air vibrated with an intensity that knocked the wind from her lungs. Let them go! She roared, the fire building within her, pushing back against all that sought to ensnare them. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed, a lamentation of shadows meeting a resistance they hadn't expected. The claw around her ankle weakened. Mom, please! Jake's panicked call rose above the chaos, a spark of clarity in the madness. With a desperate lunge, Sarah clawed her way back to him. In those frantic seconds, she felt a pull as if the darkness was giving way, opening a path back to her son. But was it a trap, a trick designed to lure them deeper? The shadows writhed in outrage. You can't escape. But she couldn't stop now. She pushed forward, each step an act of fierce defiance. All she had to do was reach Jake, take his hand again, feel the warmth that reminded her of love, determination, hope. Yet, in the distance, the laughter returned, a low, mocking chuckle that vibrated through her bones, and she knew. The creature was not done with them. This nightmare was only beginning. Mom, look out! Jake's warning pierced through the chaos, and Sarah turned just as the shadows shifted, dark and insatiable, ready to strike again. What would they face next? The chilling truth loomed like a monster in the dark, waiting eagerly for them to falter. The darkness roared in response to Jake's warning, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated around them, shaking the very ground. Tendrils jerked back, reeling in weight, gathering strength like a coiled spring. Sarah's heart raced, pounding hard against her ribcage as she wrestled with the question of what was emerging from the gloom. "Jake! Keep moving!" she yelled, the words strained and ragged. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, fueling her fight against the chilling tide creeping toward them. She felt like she was losing time, the seconds stretching yet whisking away all at once. The air thickened, suffocating as if it had become a part of the smothering blackness encircling them. In a blind panic, she lunged forward, claiming her son's hand and pulling him close. His warmth was fleeting, like light in the shadow, and it drove her onward. They stumbled together, side by side, as they weaved through the darkness, desperate to break free. "Mom, it's behind us!" Jake shouted, his voice wavering. She cast a quick glance back, heart clenching as she caught a glimpse of a figure rising, its twisted form emerging from the oily blackness like a nightmare made flesh. The glowing eyes burned bright, hungry and alive, igniting the shadows around them with a feral energy. "Run!" she screamed, pushing Jake ahead once more, feeling the pull of dread wrapping around her heart. The flicker that had promised safety was fading. It fought against the encroaching black but faltered. "No! Please, not now!" Sarah's voice trembled with fear and urgency. She felt a pull in her mind, a soft, devious whisper coaxing her to stay, to join the darkness, to give in, but the love for Jake surged within her, pushing back against the creeping despair. "We have to go now." They darted toward what remained of the light, but the shadows retaliated, snapping like whips, crackling with energy as they lashed out. One darted around her leg, yanking her back. She stumbled, barely catching herself, but Jake was still moving, always moving. She felt pitifully torn, forced to decide whether to save herself or her son. "Mom!" His voice, quivering with fear, sent another shock of nervous energy through her. Then she saw it, a small glimmer in the distance, another light, flickering like a dying star. But was it real? "Jake!" she cried out, desperation clawing at her throat. "Stay close to me." Just as she uttered the commands, the shadow's mocking laughter boomed, its sound rattling deep inside her core. Suddenly, a surge of wind burst from behind them, pushing back the shadows momentarily and illuminating a path. "A chance! This way!" Sarah shouted, taking Jake's arm tightly as she sprinted toward the flickering glow, but the shadows were relentless. They swarmed back, sliding swiftly to intercept them. Sarah felt icy fingers skimming her neck, and each breath seemed tinged with the palpable fear festering in the air, a weight that constricted around her. Then silence. The oppressive cacophony faded almost instantly, replaced by a serene stillness. An illusion? Is it over? Jake's voice trembled, uncertainty echoing in the void. "No, I don't think so," Sarah replied, scanning their surroundings. The flickering light flickered again, drawing closer, beckoning. It was sweeter now, an almost melodic tone vibrating through her chest. "Mom! Look!" Jake pointed as she turned slowly. There, emerging from the shadows, were silhouettes of children, phantoms of fear and despair filling the dark space with sorrowful expressions. Their eyes bored into her, hollow yet pleading. Tell them to join us." One whispered, its voice barely a whisper coated with an unearthly chill. "Treasured souls," waiting, another echoed, their thin, fragile forms drifting closer. What do you want?" Sarah's voice cracked, fear clawing at the back of her mind. "You must choose." They chanted in eerie unison, their voices piercing through her awareness like shards of ice. Panic surged anew, every instinct screamed to flee, but dread rooted her in place. The choice loomed ominously, more menacing than shadows. Themselves, join these lost souls or fight to find the light? "Jake, listen to me," she said, squeezing her son's hand as the shadows advanced once more, each step heavier than the last. "What will we choose?" Longing began to creep in, a siren's song weaving through her mind. What remained on the other side of this darkness? Would it be freedom or something far more sinister? The shadows swirled, tightening their grip around Sarah and Jake. Each pulse of darkness felt alive, hungry for despair. The haunting voices of the lost children melded into a sinister chant, join us, their expressions twisted between pleading and malice, welcoming yet terrifying. The fear coiled tighter around Sarah's heart, each beat thumping like an angry drum. "Mom, I can't do this." Jake whimpered, his little body trembling next to her. "Yes, we can. We have to fight back," she replied, shaking off the chill that drained her strength. The flickering light ahead wavered, taunting them as the shadows pressed in closer. Sarah felt the darkness creeping into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts, enticing her to give in, to succumb to despair. But there was something within her, a flicker of resolve, the fierce love for Jake that ignited a spark. She glanced at her son, his wide eyes filled with terror, and her heart surged. "Listen to me. We're not going to join them," she shouted defiantly, pulling Jake closer. With each word, she felt strength rising as if her voice could ripple through the darkness. "We're going to escape. You hear me? We're stronger than this." From deep within, she felt the flicker of hope. The light wasn't just in front of them, it was their bond, glowing fiercely between them. And then, rallying every ounce of strength, she shouted louder than before, "We choose life." At her declaration, the shadows recoiled, hissing as if burned. The children's faces twisted in rage, their luminous eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you can defy us?" they screeched, their voices rising into a furious din. "The power of love exceeds your darkness." Sarah pressed, grasping Jake's hand tightly. She turned toward the flickering light, which grew brighter with each passing second. It pulsed, responding to their defiance, calling them home. "Run!" she shouted, and together, they bolted forward, the light intensifying in their path, expanding with each step. The shadows screamed, twisting as they lost their grip, pulling back into the void, clawing at the air with desperate ferocity. The light shimmered, illuminating a doorway leading to a lush meadow filled with colors that seemed too bright, almost surreal. As they pushed through the threshold, they felt the boundary of darkness fade, the whispers became mere echoes, lost in the growing distance. They stumbled onto soft grass, the warmth of sunlight bathing their faces, igniting every sense within them. Jake let out a shaky breath and collapsed into a fit of relieved giggles. "We did it, Mommy. We really did it." "Yes, we did," Sarah gasped, sinking to her knees beside him. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were not tears of fear, these were tears of relief and triumph. The weight of the nightmare melted away, replaced by the tingling sensation of freedom, but the relief was short-lived as Sarah felt something creep back into her consciousness, a lingering chill from the shadows. They may have escaped, but the scars remained, echoes of what had transpired. She took a deep breath and hugged Jake tightly, feeling his heartbeat slow against her. "We're safe now. They can't hurt us anymore." A voice floated through her mind, heavy and murmurous. "You can never truly leave." But now, they were together. They had fought against darkness and emerged, and that bond would keep them safe. They stood up, brushing off remnants of their harrowing journey. In their hearts, they vowed never to forget what they had faced, but also to treasure the love that kept them strong. As they walked into the meadow to the light, they sensed that the world still whispered. For some, it opened doors to darkness, but for them, it led the way to healing. Every step ahead was a step toward a brighter future. With each passing day, they knew they would weave new memories, creating a tapestry brighter than shadows could ever touch. In Maplewood, the farmhouse stood ominously against the skyline, but its doors were shut tight. And though the man with the hat lingered just out of sight, the Anderson family had stared into their fears, shattered the silence of despair, and found in each other the true strength that could never be captured. And with that, Sarah felt peace seep into her bones. The nightmare had come to an end. They had been tested and emerged, and though scars lingered, hope blossomed anew. Together, they forged ahead. Towards safety. Towards light. And before the darkness could close in again, they turned their backs, stepping into their future. But wait. If you enjoyed this thrilling conclusion, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for our channel. Smash that like button now to help us feed the algorithm and keep bringing these stories to life. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. And flood the comments section with your reactions, theories about the dark secrets of Maplewood, or any thoughts on this epic journey. Your support matters immensely. Let us keep the light shining bright.